Cheeks. I am Managing Director of National Faith in Blue Weekend and Chief Communications and Strategic Partnerships Officer for Movement Forward Incorporated. We appreciate your time and your attention to this very important matter. As you have been informed, we are here to talk to you about National Faith in Blue Weekend, which will convene on October 9th through October 12th of 2020. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to cover with you briefly the agenda for today's call. Really quickly, I'd like to welcome, we're going to welcome Director Keith and Reverend Hutchins. We'll have an overview with some historical background on how National Faith in Blue Weekend has come to be and how it will operate and what it seeks to, what it will achieve. Law enforcement involvement, faith community collaboration. We'll have some time for open discussion, questions and answers, and then we'll wrap it up and let everyone get back to their busy lives. But again, thank you. All of the protests that we have all been aware, and for you all, first on the front lines of managing, have been planned, staged, and strategically planned, I might add, in markets across the country. Similarly, we've strategically invited you, and today we have about 53 law enforcement organizations represented from key markets across the country. Every region of the country is represented on today's call. You'll notice here a list of all of the meeting participants. And if you don't see your name or your organization's name listed here, please indicate so in the chat for today's call so that we can take note and modify that accordingly. And I will go ahead and say our sincerest apologies if we've not represented. I see Seattle has chimed in, and so my apologies to Assistant Chief Steve for us not having Seattle listed. We will definitely fix that and going forward. Every community here is a critical partner, and as I indicated, every region of the country representing 35 states are represented here on this call. So we are going to not waste your time, of course, but we are certainly going to inform you and leverage, hopefully, an opportunity to maximize and resolve, reconcile a very serious as well. I apologize. I was talking and I don't know how I got muted. I'm not sure where we fell off, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce Director Keith, Director Philip Keith, who is, we appreciate, first of all, let me just say, Director Keith represents the U.S. Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Services Office, also known as COPS Office. And we are so appreciative of COPS involvement and their support as a partner, a law enforcement partner. Director Keith, if he's on the call, Director Keith, I can't see if you're here. There was a chance that he may have had to step away for an emergency, but he had intentions and plans to be on today's call. So Director Keith and Reverend Hutchins co-convened National Faith in Blue Weekend back in April, and Reverend Hutchins will share with you the history around National Faith in Blue's inception and conceptualization. Reverend Hutchins, a foremost human and civil rights leader, will take over today's conversation with you in regard to National Faith in Blue Weekend. Reverend Hutchins, I believe, is on the line here. Reverend Hutchins, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Ms. Cheeks, and thank you to all of the law enforcement executives who have joined us for this conversation. We want to make this rapid for you, and I do apologize. I expect that Director Keith will come on the line shortly, but he did have an emergency that was unforeseen and unavoidable. There are members of his team that are on this call. But the whole purpose for this conversation today is to introduce you in key markets to this, what is now become the most collaborative community police engagement project in the history of our country. Many of you I've worked with through our One Congregation, One Precinct initiative model, and the U.S. Department of Justice through the COPS office, BJA, OJP, and other law enforcement entities in the federal government asked us to figure out a way to take the collaborative approach that we have taken and developed with the One Cop program and duplicate it in areas across the country. So we started working with the COPS office about what we could do to really leverage the faith community in every neighborhood to build bridges between police and communities. And we actually started talking about the great need for building those bridges prior to George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. And on April the 27th, Director Keith and I convened a meeting with the heads of all of the major national law enforcement associations, from IACP to the National Sheriff's Association, Noble, NALI, PERF, the Police Foundation, major county sheriffs, just all of the FOP, the other unions, everybody working together. And we all decided that a weekend of healing and reconciliation was in order for America. The mission of National Faith in Blue Weekend is simple. It's to facilitate safer and stronger communities by engaging law enforcement officers and local residents through the connections of the faith-based organizations in those local communities. National Faith in Blue Weekend will power a movement in America where law enforcement professionals and residents build connections that break down divides, that decrease bias, increase familiarity, and spur ongoing collaboration between citizens and their law enforcement professionals. There's nothing that our nation needs more now than for police and communities to come together. And I say often, there's so much more that unites us than there is that divides us. But if we look at what is happening oftentimes in social media and on local media, we don't see that level of connection. Well, through this outreach activity, leveraging the faith community that has the respect and admiration of people in local communities, we're able to power a movement. And as Cecilia talked about before, we strategically invited you who are on this call, Director Keith and I, because we're creating a movement. And the movement is to join communities and law enforcement together and stop the divisions that we've seen cast in social media and other places. And the faith community is the asset to do that. But we wanted to target specific markets that we knew had the ability to generate a national conversation. So while some of you have heard about this effort through PERF and ICP and other places, and those organizations, particularly ICP, is going to do more to reach out to chiefs across the country, we specifically wanted those of you who are on this call to be present. There are 54 law enforcement agencies. Well, I see there are others. Seattle is here, Portland, Maine is here, Boise, Idaho, and several other places that are not on our list, Fort Worth, Texas. We wanted specifically for some of you, and I know we've got some of our nation's most prominent law enforcement executives on this call. The president of Major County Chiefs, Art Acevedo, is on, Jerry Williams from Phoenix, so many of you, Marion Brown from Dallas County, Texas, the sheriff of Tarrant County, the police commissioner of New York and Norfolk, New York City and Norfolk County, New York, the police chief from Washington, D.C. What I'm trying to tell you is there are many, many prominent law enforcement executives on this call, and we appreciate your being here. The what, and we will move through this quickly because we want to give you a great overview of what National Faith in Blue Weekend is, answer any of your questions, and our objective is to have you off of this call within the next 30 minutes. What National Faith in Blue Weekend is a collaborative initiative that breaks down bias and breaks down barriers by building bridges through activities and outreach amongst law enforcement professionals and the communities that they serve. National Faith in Blue Weekend is based on the premise that strong communities are built on mutual respect and understanding. Law enforcement entities and faith-based organizations in local neighborhoods are both key pillars in any community, and when they work together, communities and neighborhoods thrive. In terms of the how, National Faith in Blue Weekend is an extension of the One Congregation, One Precinct, or One Cop program of Movement Forward, Inc., the organization that I lead and that my team works for. And we are a human and civil rights organization based in Atlanta that is solutions focused. The One Cop initiative pairs officers at the beat or precinct level with local houses of worship to begin to build community. Similarly, National Faith in Blue Weekend is facilitated by law enforcement entities, faith-based organizations, and the community at large. I've stressed this before, and I'm so proud to be able to tell you that the organizers of National Faith in Blue Weekend represent nearly every major national professional and membership organization in law enforcement and every faith tradition in the United States of America. The effort is co-convened again by our One Cop initiative and the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, or COPS office, to organize the most collaborative police community project in recent history. Now to talk about why we focused on the faith community, I want to bring in the co-chair of National Faith in Blue Weekend, who is my Chief Operating Officer and Executive Director, Jared Foyer. Jared?
Thank you, Reverend, and good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. One important question is, when thinking about Faith in Blue, why the faith component? And the answer is that there is simply no community resource that rivals the breadth and the depth of the faith community. As you can see on this slide, there are over 350,000 houses of worship across the country. And together, they engage 65 million congregants in weekly observance. And these houses of worship can be found in large cities, in small towns, in every state from coast to coast. And collectively, they represent the diverse canvas of our country. And so when we were planning for an event that would facilitate connections between law enforcement and the residents that they protect and serve, the faith community just stood out to us. They are the front door through which you engage your residents, and engaging them directly leads to improvement in public safety and to positive interactions. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, Jared. That's why the faith community. In terms of hosting an event, we have created a best-in-class web portal that's built by a top firm in Nebraska called Grain and Mortar. Grain and Mortar is the same firm that built the website for Coffee with a Cop. In fact, they came as a reference from Coffee with a Cop, which, by the way, what we've done with National Faith in Blue Weekend is we've taken the best of National Night Out, the best of Coffee with a Cop. We've learned from them. We've brought those resources together and enhanced them to create National Faith in Blue Weekend. Through the website, which is found at faithandblue.org, a person in a law enforcement association or law enforcement entity or a faith-based organization can go in and host an event by one, signing up. The interested party would visit www.faithandblue.org. They would, on the website, fill out an inquiry form and download a detailed planning toolkit. And we are very proud of the toolkit. Number three, a Faith in Blue team member, one of our national team members, will reach out to the prospective host of the event. We will offer support to them and help them complete the registration process. We implemented this step to ensure that we're able to monitor and really investigate and make sure that every event that's being posted on the web portal is an actual house of worship or respected community organization. They would then, the house of worship or the law enforcement agency or both, would make certain to invite the community at large. The event is then held utilizing the toolkit, and feedback is provided to us here at Faith in Blue so that in subsequent years and in our follow-up, we're able to learn the best of what has happened around the country and be able to tell this story. I referenced the toolkit earlier. In the toolkit, there are a number of different types of activities, all of them aimed at positively uniting law enforcement and communities together. So to talk a little bit about the kind of activities that are contained in the toolkit and the kind of activities we anticipate for Faith in Blue Weekend, I want to bring in, again, Jared Foyer, our Chief Operating Officer and National Co-Chair of Faith in Blue Weekend. Jared?
Thank you, Reverend. So we want Faith in Blue Weekend to be comprised of activities that are engaging, that are creative, and relevant. And so we actually had a lot of fun designing what are 15 sample activities that you can find in the toolkit. And they run the gamut from a community service project to a book discussion, to a community conversation, to a picnic. And some of them have a light touch and others facilitate deeper dialogue. But all the steps that are necessary to organize each of these 15 sample activities are laid out in the toolkit, from the advanced planning steps to what you have to do on the day of the event. And for each sample activity, there is an in-person, a socially distanced, and a virtual option. So each community can have an event in the way that makes sense for them, especially considering what is ongoing with COVID. But what's important to understand is that these are not the only activities that can be organized. There are 3 core requirements for an activity. They first have to involve a house of worship, they have to involve a law enforcement agency, and they have to be open to the public. But after that, it's up to the creativity and the individual needs of a community. Thank you, Reverend. Reverend, you might be muted.
Thank you, Jared. I'm sorry. So those are some of the activities, and I want the law enforcement executives to know that these activities were developed in collaboration with the COPS office at the DOJ, the Office of Justice Programs, and BJA, as well as ICP, National Sheriff's Association, NAWLI, and I believe the FOP played a role in making sure that these were all activities that were acceptable to law enforcement, but also would engage community. The toolkit we've talked about a great deal. In the toolkit, you'll find planning steps for the sample activities. So literally, it's a turnkey planning toolkit where a law enforcement agency and or a house of worship will have the sample activities that will give them a guide. There's sample media advisories. There's a checklist for getting started, and there are answers to frequently asked questions. If you look on the right of your screen, you will see that there is a graphic that it represents the cover of the planning toolkit. So not only does the website offer the toolkit, but it also has a number of other customizable resources that can be utilized by your local law enforcement agency. You'll find customizable posters, postcards, banners, t-shirts, social media banners, online advertising support, their graphics and logos, all designed, again, to provide a turnkey system so that any law enforcement entity and any house of worship can immediately go and organize. And we did this, we employed a best-in-class, as I mentioned, marketing and advertising company to make certain that this was a simple process that was not complex and that no one would have any trouble accessing this. I'm going to bring in now to show you some of the tools and resources that are in the toolkit and that are in the web portal under the resources tab that will help every agency to organize and get the word out and actually host the event. I'm going to bring in, again, Cecilia Cheeks, who is our National Managing Director of National Faith in Blue Weekend. Cecilia?
Thank you, Reverend. And to build upon what Reverend just shared with you as it relates to the branding assets, we were very thoughtful to build a sense of community and cohesion in these assets, just as the program and initiative itself is meant to, it will be. The branding elements have been developed to inform and excite for participation. These elements are customizable. For instance, there you have here a poster in which the hosting organization and location, that being law enforcement and the house of worship, will drop their information into this downloadable poster, and then they can take it to their local printer, or in some cases print locally within their own offices. So these elements are, as I indicated, customizable, cost effective to reproduce, and have a broad appeal to a variety of needs, as every community has unique DNA, as you might imagine, and subsequently their needs. Such impact will not occur overnight. So we are very conscious of the fact that National Faith and Blue Weekend is essentially a kickoff to an ongoing engagement that will require that our assets are evergreen, and so that these ongoing engagements, we can continue to leverage these assets beyond the weekend with minor modifications in some cases, so that they are reusable and we're efficient in reproducing the future days of engagement.
Cecilia, I want to jump in there as well. One of the things that we built in consideration of every local law enforcement agency are the T-shirts and other placards. You can see some of that on your screen now with the customizable posters. On the front of them, they have all of the National Faith and Blue Weekend information, again, creating a national movement. But on the back of the T-shirts, we left room specifically for every agency and house of worship to put your logo on the back. So there's branding opportunity for every agency to be present and to be heard. With regard to hosting an activity, we mentioned how you host an activity. We did not tell you about what the website offers for a community resident that simply wants to find an activity. So these activities are not just available and should not just be houses of worship and law enforcement, but they're community activities. The house of worship is simply serving as a central organizing mechanism. So if any person goes to faithandblue.org, they can search for an event nearby them by their zip code or by their address or by their city. The event details will be listed, so they'll be populated all over the country on the map, and you'll be able to see them. You'll see the event details, including the location, the participating organizations, both the faith-based organizations and the houses of worship, the faith-based organizations and the law enforcement entities. You'll be able to see the date and the time. So any person in any community will easily be able to access this web portal information and find an event near them. They will also be able to invite and share out information from this tab, the Finding an Event tab on the website. And the final option under the Finding an Event tab will be if you can't find an event, if there's not already an event in your local community, we will offer the opportunity to provide support for those persons to then organize an event of their own. So the web portal, again, allows not only for hosting, but it allows community residents to go in and find an event as well. One of the things that I mentioned earlier that we're extremely excited about is all of our law enforcement partners. I've said this before, never before in history have all or nearly all of the major national law enforcement associations and membership organizations united on one single police community engagement project. So to talk a little bit about our law enforcement partners and the deep engagement we have with them, I'm going to ask Jared to come back in and to kind of walk through our law enforcement partners. And I know that my special friend, the Chief of Phoenix, has to leave shortly. So I'm trying to get to the question and answer period before Chief Williams leaves. Go right ahead, Jared. Jared.
Thank you, Reverend, and I'll be brief as well. We are really honored that nearly every major national law enforcement organization, including the 3 divisions of the Department of Justice that deal most closely with community policing and policing, are engaged in this. You can see all the icons from the different organizations, from the National Sheriff's Association to the Fraternal Order of Police to the National Black Police Association. They have been involved with the planning of this initiative since we brought them together in April. And we actually started this before the tragic death of George Floyd, but there was already this sense of engagement, the sense that there needed to be more community engagement and the sense of creating some type of a movement where the community and police were able to get together. And so for that reason, all these different organizations have come together. They have been part of an active working group that has been meeting, that has been planning, and that has been working to make this initiative a reality. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, Jared. Again, there is no cost to any law enforcement entity to be involved in National Faith and Blue Weekend. All of the resources, all of the support, we're going to provide free of charge. We have some dollars to help market certain things in I'm sorry. I don't know. Somebody just jumped in. Um, feels like we had a hacker there. Is the screen back correct?
It is.
Okay. Through the generosity of FirstNet, built with AT&T and the Motorola Solutions Foundation, we are able to offer all of these resources, assets, and support completely free of charge to every agency. We want to make a change, so there's no cost involved for any house of worship and any law enforcement association, due again to the generosity of FirstNet, built with AT&T and the Motorola Solutions Foundation. The question is asked, why participate and why now? I think for most of the chiefs and sheriffs and other law enforcement executives on this call, it's clear. We cannot wait until another George Floyd situation happens anywhere in America to do something in a collaborative, consolidated way across the country. Every agency, every department, particularly those of you who are on this call, have felt the aftermaths and the aftershocks of what happened with George Floyd. We need a weekend or period of reconciliation, of resolution and healing, and it's needed now. It needs to happen before this election period, because it's probably going to be a contentious and divisive election. It needs to happen because COVID has magnified, in some real sense, community-related tensions between some law enforcement entities and citizens. And tough conversations really have to be had about mutual bias and the need to come together. And I say this, Chief Williams, I've said it all across the country, there really is more that unites us than there is that divides us. And so often over the last several months, we've been focused on our divisions, but we've got to focus the American people on the things that we have in common, because we're not as divided as we are disconnected. Every law enforcement officer in the country would benefit from knowing people in the communities, having some engagement, and the community wants and deserves solutions-oriented leadership. We cannot continue as a nation with some people standing in their corners yelling their lives matter, while others stand in a different corner yelling our lives matter. We've got to find a way to come together, and this is what National Faith in Blue Weekend is all about. And because it will happen in communities across the country, we can really have an impact and create a national movement. To that end, Director Keith and I'm going to call and see if he's on, but Director Keith and I and our teams really strategically want you all to focus specifically in your communities. We need your help. I see Director Keith is now on. We need your help. We need those of you who are on this call. Again, we invited 75 agencies, and it looks like about 65 of you have shown up. You are in strategic communities. We're creating a movement. This is not just a one and done thing. Every law enforcement professional in the country should have an opportunity to engage in something that is really positive, that is really meaningful, that is really, really helpful. So to that end, we want to ask you to do 7 things. Those of you who are on this call, we need you to do 7 things. And I see Director Keith is on. I'm going to call upon him when I'm done, and then we'll answer any questions. Number 1, we want you to designate a coordinator for your agency by completing the form at www.faithinblue.org/agency. Again, I'm going to leave this up. Please go to faithinblue.org/agency and complete the online form that will let us know who the designated coordinator is, the single point of contact for your agency. And for those agencies that are on this call, because you are in key and strategic markets, I have asked our highest ranking official, Jared Foyer, to be your direct point of contact. We will provide any support you need with letter writing, with framing and messaging, getting you the toolkit and resources you need, whatever it is that you need. Jared is the senior most person here. We're willing to dedicate dollars and resources to marketing in your community, although we have limited resources. We're willing to do that because, again, you all are key and strategic areas where Faith in Blue has got to have a large presence October 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Number two, we would like for all of the agencies on this call to publicly announce your participation. Again, the idea is to create a movement. Just like there are other people who are creating movements and things that are dividing communities from police, we want to work with you to create a movement that unites law enforcement and communities together. Number two, publicly announce your participation. Number three, post on your social media platforms using the hashtag #FaithInBlue. Number four, notify the houses of worship in your jurisdiction of the weekend. Most of the agencies on this call, I know, have pre-existing relationships with your local houses of worship. You already know them, they already know you. We want you to notify all of them about National Faith in Blue Weekend and ask them to partner with you to plan activities. Number five, this is very important. I know that NYPD is on. NYPD is the largest the largest local police organization in the country. We want New York and Philadelphia and all of the major cities that are represented on this call to have marquee events, and we want to work with you in that area. But we want, number five, all of the agencies that are on this call to plan as many activities as possible with at least one event per zone, precinct, or area of patrol within your jurisdiction. So everyone, we ask of you that at least one Faith in Blue activity be held for every precinct, every zone, every beat, every patrol area that you have in your department. So for example, New York City has 77 police precincts. We would hope that those precincts would do multiple events, but at least one event per precinct to happen over the course of the weekend. Six, we always want you to register your events at faithinblue.org, and then of course post a video message about Faith in Blue from the agency head. We want you to take ownership. We want to be here to support you. We want to be here to support your organizing. But the first order of business is we, one, ask that you would commit that for every zone, beat, or every zone, a precinct, or patrol area that you would have at least one Faith in Blue activity for every one of your precincts, zones, or beat areas in collaboration with a local house of worship. But the first order of business, of course, is to fill out that form at faithinblue.org/agency so that we have a direct point of contact. Those of you on this line are too busy to manage this effort yourself. So we want to work with your team to manage this effort. So now we will entertain any of your questions. I'm going to ask you, you're able to unmute yourself, but I want to hear from a couple of our law enforcement partners. I will first start with Sheriff Marion Brown. I'm going to go just across the country and hear from 3 or 4 law enforcement executives, but we want to hear from you and then answer any of your questions. I will start with Sheriff Marion Brown from the great state of Texas. She's Sheriff of Dallas County, Texas. Sheriff Brown, we'd love to know your thoughts.
Reverend Hutchins, thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I just would like to say how honored I am to be invited to participate in this initiative. And I think that you guys have got it right in that it's going to take all of those elements of the community working together to get us to where we need to be, to get us out of the position that we are in now, to build those bridges and to work together as a community as we should be doing. I am looking forward to participating in this initiative. Faith for me, as well as law enforcement, as you obviously know, is a huge part of my life. And so I am really excited about the event. I'm excited about learning more about the initiative. I anticipate that we will be participating in the event and doing what we can to help push this initiative forward.
Let's go to Los Angeles, California, Chief Myron Johnson from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office. Chief Johnson, are you on? I see him talking, but it looks like he's muted. I'll go to Suffolk, New York, the Police Commissioner, Jerry Hart, is with us. Commissioner?
Good afternoon, everybody. Wow, this is really a terrific initiative and exactly what we need in our communities right now. So I just want to thank the Reverend and everybody who has participated. It's obvious that a tremendous amount of work went into this. It seems very, very organized and really ready to launch. So I can tell you that Suffolk County is ready. we're on the eastern part of Long Island and we're looking forward to it. We actually have an event planned that we're going to repurpose now and turn it into to a Faith in Blue event. So I want to thank everybody and we look forward to participating. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go quickly, if we could, to New York City, New York. The NYPD is the largest local law enforcement agency in the country. What say you, NYPD?
Good afternoon, Rep. It's Chief Madry from the Community Affairs Bureau, representing Commissioner Shea, who couldn't be here this afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for your vision and your leadership into the whole Faith in Blue organization. Thank you for your leadership. This sounds really good to me, especially during these difficult times. Trying to repair some fractured relationships out here in New York City. An event like this, I think, could do wonders to help rebuild those relationships and make sure people know that they have a police department that supports them. So I know that it would be great for us here in New York, and I'm sure all my colleagues on this call would be great for their agencies as well, to help restore some of that trust and to rebuild and repurpose some of those relationships out there that have been lost over the last few months. Many of these relationships that we worked hard to build up, and in the blink of an eye, we lost them. So I know I support this endeavor, and I'm pretty sure Police Commissioner Shea is going to support this endeavor, and I'm probably going to be the agency contact person for it. So I'll be doing my part real soon to make sure you know that you have the support of the NYPD and that we're all in. Thank you.
Thank you. One final one, and then Cecilia, if you could look and see who's raised their hands and we can call upon those people. I see the sheriff of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, one of my favorite cities. Sheriff Bilal, so glad to have you. We'd love to know what you think there in the great state of Pennsylvania.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. Can you hear me? I'm just making sure that.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I got the high-tech machine here. I can tell when I'm talking. Thank you. We are already on this. Once we got the information, put the team together here in the sheriff's office. I'm hoping that Philadelphia PD, if they're on here, that we can our teams can get together to make sure this goes citywide as to everything that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Philadelphia PD is on the line. Sheriff Orlando Rowland from Orlando, Florida. Are you on, Chief? Orlando PD, I believe. Orlando PD, I believe.
Yes, actually, Orlando from Orlando, so it's a little confusing there. But yeah, we're looking forward to becoming part of this. Could not tell you how excited we are about this opportunity. Our Chaplain Wade, should be on the line also, and one of our captains, who more than likely, Captain Quinn Henry, who will be leading our effort on our end, but very excited, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this.
Thank you. Peter Newsham is the Chief of Police in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and he and I had a chance to speak very briefly yesterday. Chief, I just want to hear from you, and then we will answer any questions. Cecilia, if you're ready.
Oh, Reverend from DC, I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to participate in this event. I think it's a great idea. Our faith-based communities, our faith-based leadership, I think are really the key to kind of mending the fences that have been broken by the murder of George Floyd. They do have the capacity to reach all walks of life, all denominations of religions within our communities. Whoever thought of this idea, hats off to them. And you can anticipate that the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. is going to participate. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you. Todd Bettis has a question from the Detroit Police Department. Go right ahead, sir.
Hi, Deputy Chief Bedison representing Chief Craig. If Chief Craig was on the line, I already know what he would say. Thus far, since May 29th, we've had protests in the city of Detroit each and every day. Our officers are definitely fatigued because we deploy upwards of 100 officers per day just to deal with protesters. But by and large, our community, the silent majority, has been supportive, and it's a small minority of folks that have been continuously protesting, trying to incite violence. Thus far, they've been unsuccessful. But the chief has definitely called out for our religious institutions to step up. So this will be welcomed, and it's a blueprint for them how to actually step up and help law enforcement, specifically the Detroit Police Department. So this is very much welcome, and thank you all.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. And I would note that there's nothing, as I've said before, there's nothing inherently religious about what we're doing. It's just a faith community is in a faith-based organization is in every neighborhood, is in every community. And there are no other community organizations or group that can command the kind of respect and the kind of participation that the faith-based community does. That's why we anchored this in the faith-based space. We have another question from the Jackson, Mississippi Police Department, Corporal Suttles.
Asking a question, dealing with the faith-based community within your cities, should we actually put one of the ministers on like that designated board when you're saying to help the coordinator with the faith-based community to draw them in to have a stronger support from the faith-based area, put to work hand in hand with them as well?
Well, I think that should be done at the local level with the department. What we're looking for is the coordinator for your agency that our team can work with and support, making sure that you have all the resources that you need that we can provide from the national office and from the COPS office. So that's kind of what we're looking for.
Okay.
And so, Jared would be happy to talk with you again. Please, everyone, faithandblue.org/agency. Would love to hear from you. Director Glenn Brooks from the Chicago Police Department. Director Brooks leads community engagement for Chicago PD. Director Brooks has a question.
So it's not so much a question. I just want to kind of echo it. Clearly all of policing throughout the country has been challenged since George Floyd, particularly like our city, like many of yours, we've seen untold number of protests, sometimes multiple protests a day, where we have not been as fortunate as other cities. We've experienced some violence for it, yet our communities have continued to support us. I can't tell you how significant it is for a nationwide effort to go forward. When we speak as an industry reaching out to the community, it sends a very powerful message. But beside the message, our actual sincerity in reaching back to community is greatly needed right now. And I really do want to echo and applaud you for putting it together in a succinct package, which as an agency, we really do appreciate that, because it allows us to really focus on growing and maintaining those relationships. So thank you. We're looking forward to it on behalf of Superintendent Brown.
Thank you. We have 9 more minutes, and we have not heard from my cohort, who has been gracious as the director of the COPS office, a longtime law enforcement professional that leads the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. And when I first called him about this effort, I've had a relationship with him. We've been friends for quite some time. But I reached out to him, and he was very much welcome to the idea. There are a lot of challenges that we have. There are a lot of political differences between cities. There are a lot of political differences between this administration and a lot of your towns and cities and counties and your mayors and local executives. But at some point, I'm a big student of Martin Luther King Jr.'s. At some point, Dr. King said, we have to sit at a table of brotherhood and sisterhood. No one wins if we're only talking to people that believe like we believe, which is why we have, as a civil and human rights organization, brought together the law enforcement community across the board, because people do want to see change. But officers are under undue stress like never before, and communities need to understand that police officers have a hard job, and what we see in social media is not always what is actually happening. But these kind of conversations can't just happen nationwide. They have to happen in every local neighborhood. They have to happen in every local community. And Director Keith has been at the forefront of that. I'll say this and then I'll ask him to speak. When I testified before the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice several weeks ago, what I said to the commission is there's a lot of talk in America today about the need for police reform. And that may be true. There does need to be some reform. But the biggest reformation that needs to happen is relational reformation. How citizens and law enforcement officers relate to one another. What killed George Floyd was not a lack of adequate policy or procedure. The officer that killed George Floyd didn't see the humanity in him. And that's what we have to fix. We have to fix it so that officers see the humanity in the people that they're policing. And on the other side of it, those 6 officers that were killed in Dallas several years ago were gunned down by an assassin who didn't see the humanity in the families of those officers and in their personhoods. That's what Faith in Blue Weekend is all about, causing us to see the humanity in one another. And that's a level of reform that won't be printed in a manual. It won't be written in ink in a piece of legislation or in a policy or procedure manual. That kind of reform will be imprinted in the hearts and minds of the American people and law enforcement alike. So that's what Faith in Blue Weekend is all about. Director Keith, we haven't heard from you. If there are any other questions, please raise your hand. We've got an additional 4 minutes. So Director Keith, please, we have some of the nation's most prominent law enforcement executives on the line with us, and I'm glad you were able to join us.
Thank you, Reverend. I'm getting ready to take off, so I don't know how long I'm going to have connection with you, but on behalf of General Barr, we certainly appreciate your leadership in this effort. I just left a briefing with Chief Craig and Deputy Chief Bettis here in Detroit, so we had a great meeting, and it just speaks volumes about how law enforcement wants to do the right thing, and Faith in Blue Weekend is doing the right thing. I know you asked earlier, why should we do it? Because it's the right thing to do, and it's a timely thing to do. And I thank all the law enforcement folks that are on the call, and on behalf of General Barr, we certainly encourage you to participate with this initiative, as we think it's a step toward healing and a step toward bringing our communities together. Reverend, I don't know how long I'm going to have this contact, so I'm going to cut it short. Just thank you again for your leadership. I thank everyone on the call for their participation. It certainly means a lot to all of us in the COPS office. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you. To close us out, I'm going to call upon a gentleman who is as responsible. For any of you that know my history, I've been at the forefront of human and civil rights advocacy nationally for a long time. I'm mentored by all of the icons of the civil rights movement. But through my exposure, I went from a person that just protested and marched against police to someone that is determined to cause communities to march with police. And as responsible as anybody for that is the chief of police in Montgomery, Alabama, who was once a deputy chief in Atlanta. Our chief of police, Rodney Bryan, is also on the call with us. But I want to call upon Chief Finley just to have some closing remarks. And then if it's okay, I'm going to do something that I don't typically do, but I feel inclined to close us in prayer. Chief Finley, can we hear from you? You're muted, Chief.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity just to say a couple words. And you're absolutely right, Pastor. We go back some years and some heartaches back in the 2007, 2008. But your commitment to this Faith in Blue, I think, is outstanding. And we are totally committed. And I will reach out to the local law enforcement areas in Montgomery just to have them be a part of this tremendous week in October. So thank you for your leadership in making this happen, and for all the law enforcement executives that are on this, because I think this is a win-win for us during these trying times. And just God bless, and just make sure that our families, our communities are safe.
Thank you so much. And again, I so apologize. I'm trying to do the best I can to cover every region of the country in terms of having law enforcement professionals to make remarks. There are a bunch of police chiefs of major jurisdictions. I see Charleston and Pittsburgh and Indianapolis and Cleveland. And I see all of you, and I just can't, we don't have the time for everybody to speak. But I would ask you again, the two most important things that I would ask you to do is really take ownership of this and make it your own. We'll support, we'll provide whatever support. There's no right or wrong way to do National Faith in Blue Weekend. It's Friday, October 9th, Saturday, October 10th, Sunday, October 11th, and Monday, October 12th. We want to make sure that you do as many activities as you can with your local faith-based organizations, but please at least do one per precinct, zone, or beat or patrol area. And finally, if you don't do anything else, please go to faithandblue.org/agency and fill out that simple form that will let us know who the direct contact person and coordinator will be for your local agency. And Jared will get with them and make sure that the 50, the 60 something agencies that are on this call, we have marquee events in those areas. Again, thank you to AT&T and Motorola for making this all possible. If you all don't mind, can we just pray together? God, we know you by so many different names, but God, we are giving our efforts to you. God, we are believers. Some of us are not even believers, but all of that is inconsequential because we love one another and we love our humanity. Bring us closer together as we seek to create a movement, not as we seek, but as we create a movement across this country that will draw communities and law enforcement together. We know that this is not just good work, but it is your work. We pray for every law enforcement professional in the United States of America. God, I just believe that if we have enough faith, you have the power to transform this moment from a divisive moment into one that transforms our nation. God, I pray for every police department and sheriff's office that's represented on this call. I pray that you would protect this day every person that works in any of the jurisdictions that are represented here. God, we're so careful to give you the praise. I pray for every law enforcement association. God, I thank you for all of the partners that have come together to make this a success. We know if we take one step, you'll take two. I pray that you would bring us together in a movement that will not only change policy and procedure, but that will transform policing, that will transform our humanity. God, there's so much anger and division and divisiveness in our nation today. But we believe that law enforcement and the faith community can provide an example, even for our politicians, that calls us to a more higher destiny and a more noble expression of our humaneness. If you do this, we'll give you praise. There's so much we don't know, we don't understand, but we know this, there's a higher power that's in control. Lead, guide us, and make of this moment a movement for success for all of humanity. We give you praise in your name. Amen.
Amen. Reverend,
you,
this is Cecilia. Reverend?
Yes.
Reverend, I'm sorry. I just wanted to respond to an overarching and overwhelming question that's being asked in regard to the presentation and getting a copy of that. And we will be certain to provide a copy and a copy of a recording of today's meeting to you all after today's meeting. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that, as we've had several questions and emails have been provided. They will be captured and saved.
Yes, and most importantly, if they fill out the form, we can share that presentation also, in addition to those that have put their emails in, we can also share it with the direct coordinators for all of the agencies that are on the call. Thank you so much for everyone for participating. Have a wonderful afternoon.